Thank you, Kristen. Good morning, everybody. I'm Eli Cooper, the manager of the Transit Division here at Oakland County, and I have Sarah Lagpikin with me. She's our principal planner. Together, we'll be walking through a handful of slides and be available to answer your questions. Before I get started, I have a few housekeeping items to cover, and part of those housekeeping items are going to be to put your questions in the chat. So as you're brought into this webinar, you are muted by us, but also please, if you could, mute your audio and turn off your camera. Also, I'd ask for the purposes of retaining inventory of who's here, please type your name, organization, and email address in the chat. I also do want to note that this webinar is being recorded. And this way we will be placing it on the website for those who are unable to join us at this time. The webinar will be posted along with the slides on the Access to Transit website, which is available on your screen now. Don't try to type it. I think what we can do is we can drop that in the chat, and it will also be available once we post the webinar. And again, they tell me if you want someone to remember something, say it 3 times. So I think this is the 3rd time. I'm going to say, please type your questions into the chat. We will address them at the end of the presentation. I'll wait a moment here for you folks to have the ability to type your name, organization, and email. And for those who have done it, thank you and welcome. Okay, now to get started. It's been about 2 years since the adoption of Oakland County's countywide transit millage. Over the first couple years here, we as Oakland Transit staff have been working to extend transit services throughout the county. As you look at the map on the slide in front of you, you can see based on the colors the success that we've found, that all of the communities are served by one of the operators. The county has 5 contracts. And for those of you who are not familiar, you can find your community on the map, and it cross-references with the colors below, and then the contact information, both a QR code as well as a phone number for you or any of your residents who would be interested in, I want to ride a bus, who do I call? So again, if you're in Holly, for example, you can see it's that it looks like a burnt orange color to me. I'm not sure what it looks like on your screen. That's the Western Oakland Transportation Authority, or WOTA service area, and their phone number. As I said before, we have spread transit countywide. Next slide, please. And you might ask the question, what do you mean by transit? And so there are different forms of transit, and I'm going to go through a couple of quick slides here to outline the types of transit that are available in Oakland County today. In the lowest level of service is what we call community transit. And these are trips where you would contact the service provider, any of the 5 that were on the previous slide, and they will ask where you want to go, when you want to go. There is a pre-booking requirement. It's typically 3 days in Oakland County. And there's a priority given to medical trips for folks who have life-sustaining service. There is what I will say ample capacity, although some of our operators are hard-pressed during peak periods. So for anyone who's interested in scheduling a community transit trip, I would encourage you to share with your citizens, call as soon as they're aware of their travel demand. Microtransit is a day of on-demand service similar to Uber and Lyft. This is a demonstration program offered by SMART in 3 different areas within the county That would be the Pontiac area. I refer to it more as the Troy area and the Farmington Hills area. These are, again, on-demand service, day of travel, and the details are available on SMART's website. The ADA paratransit and fixed route are a combination. Fixed route is the large 40-foot or so buses that you see running on scheduled time on designated roads with bus stops where folks would get picked up or dropped off. For individuals who are unable to travel or walk to a bus stop, the ADA paratransit is a service where eligible individuals register with SMART, and they would be then booking their trips similar to community transit, but it's a different level of service because it's a federally required paratransit service to complement fixed route availability for individuals who cannot get to the bus stops. Next slide. In terms of the operating characteristics for the community service, it's described as curb to curb or door to door as it's printed on the slide. This is how individuals would access the service. For those of you who are observing the webinar, what I'd like for you to do is to consider how you might in your community access, enhance access and safety for the type of transit that's in your community. So the community transit areas outside of the SMART fixed route area. And again, that is an opportunity for different types of improvements that enable transit vans and small buses to navigate as close to the location as is possible. The virtual stop to stop, again, this aligns with the flex service and what'll happen for individuals. This one's harder for us as communities to make physical improvements for. But what happens is when someone reserves a flex trip, the application actually directs the individual where to go to pick up the ride. And so, again, I just wanted to be clear that it is included in our definition of transit, but it's going to be a little more difficult to make public investments in order to serve. Curb to curb, again, this is the general paratransit type service. Opportunities and issues that Sarah will cover more in the program details are to make sure that there are connections between the residents and the sidewalk / curb realm in order to enable for that pickup to be safe and convenient. And lastly, the bus stop to bus stop in a fixed route service. This is the type of area where the safety, access, and convenience for a rider is paramount. We don't believe that the ride begins when one boards the vehicle, but when that individual conceptualizes the trip and they need to leave their house. Hopefully, there's a pedestrian way well lighted or at least lighted with appropriate safe street crossing devices, all elements that would be candidates projects for this program. Next slide, please. So what we at Oakland Transit have realized is that the transit operators themselves, as we would appreciate, focus on the safe and efficient operation. They focus on driver training and the aspects and attributes of the fixed route service. What we would like to work with you on is to address those issues that I touched on in the last slide to make sure that the riding public has safe, easy, and comfortable access to their transit service. This program that we are offering is drawn from the transit millage that we have collected. We have the Board of Commissioners authorization to allocate $2 million to support local governments in Oakland County, again, with the emphasis on easier, safer, and more comfortable access to transit, as well as time spent waiting for the service. Next. The emphasis on this access to transit is, again, beyond the actual bus stop itself, although if, from your perspective, there are opportunities for enhancements around bus stops, but we'd like to encourage you to think beyond the actual ride to address what is commonly referred to for us transit geeks as the first to last mile problem. That's the first mile when you leave your house till you get to the bus stop, and that last mile when you get off the bus to you arrive at your destination. What we would like is your local expertise in providing us input to combine with our support. We look forward collectively with you to making riders of transit in Oakland County safe. The service is easy to access and it's enjoyable. With that, that completes my introduction to the topic. I will turn it over to Sarah, who will walk you through the details of the program. And again, let me remind you to please, any questions, type them into the chat. And thank you for joining us here this morning. We do look forward to working with you over time. Thank you.
Thank you,
Sarah?
Eli. Appreciate that overview of the program. I'm going to dive a little bit more into the weeds here for what we're actually offering in terms of the funding and how you can access it, what kind of projects we're looking for, and how those will be scored for selection. So first, I want to give an overview of what kind of projects are eligible for funding through our program. The eligible phases include conceptual design, preliminary engineering, bidding and construction engineering. So if you have a project that is within any of these phases, it would be eligible for funding under our program. And the next few bullets just go over some examples of the kind of projects that we're looking to fund. And you'll notice that there's quite a span. We have a lot of different types of transit in our communities, as Eli showed, and the ways that we can improve access to those services take a lot of different forms. And so I would just like to give us a few examples of the kind of projects that we're looking at. It could be as general as universal accessibility improvements. The picture here shows kind of a drop-off pickup area in front of a senior center. So if there are improvements to these kinds of facilities that can improve transit vehicles access and riders access to and from these high ridership locations, that's something that we'd be looking to support. Things like on-road and off-road bicycle facilities and amenities improve riders' access to and from bus stops via biking, which is a common way for people to access transit. Bus stop amenities and enhancements to those, things like shelters, electronic schedules like the one shown on the bottom of the screen here. These also help riders to better access transit services. And intersection improvements. If you're going to and from locations using transit, you need to cross the street a lot of times to get to the opposite side of the street to access the other direction of transit travel. And so making sure that there are safe crossings at intersections is a really important factor. Some other examples include mobility hub elements, such as bike share stations. There's a picture of a MOGO station in Ferndale here. That's a good example. Filling gaps in pedestrian networks. So there may be a bus stop in a location, but if there's no way to get there in terms of sidewalk connections to and from actual destinations, transit can only be so effective. And so filling gaps in pedestrian networks is a great consideration, something that we'd be really looking to fund with our program. Street lighting, street trees, and streetscape all improve the environment in which transit riders are waiting for transit or looking to get on the bus stop and can really enhance their experience. And so this is another key consideration. Wayfinding signage to help bus transit riders get to and from bus stops and understand how to get to their final destination or from a destination to a transit center, etc. Is also another example. Park and ride enhancements. And then if there's anything that we are forgetting or that you have an innovative idea about, we're also open to those kinds of projects. And you can provide a lot of information about your idea in your application. And I'll get into how you actually do that here in a minute. So I'm sure you're wondering, okay, that's wonderful. How will these projects actually be selected for funding? And so I will just say right now, I'm sure any question that you have could probably be answered referring to the program guide that's on the Oakland Transit website. So please go there and take a look. But just to give you a broad overview, the selection criteria that we've put in place for determining which projects will receive funding include how close the project is to either transit pickup and drop off areas or to actual transit stops, how the project will improve access and safety, how well supported the project is by either public engagement processes or publicly supported plans, how the project is designed, how the project will increase ridership, whether or not the project is located in a community with equity populations, how the project will be maintained long-term. This is a really important one. We don't want to be putting in infrastructure that won't be maintained over time. And so having a plan in place for how the project will be maintained over time is really important to us. And then how the project is designed to incorporate universal accessibility so that folks with mobility devices can still access and use transit. Our selection committee for projects is, I can try to speak up here. Yes, thanks for putting that in the chat. Our selection committee is composed of Oakland County staff from both the transit division and the planning division. It also incorporates representatives from our transit providers, and that includes folks on both the fixed route and demand response side of things. And then we're also including road agencies. A lot of these projects do happen on state and county roads, and so we want to make sure that the agencies involved in permitting those projects have a window into the projects that are received in terms of applications. How will the projects be funded? Again, there's more detail about this in the program guide, but we do have grant award limits for the different phases of projects, and those are listed on the screen here for conceptual design, preliminary engineering, bidding and construction engineering. They all have different caps, just wanting to keep our funding within the appropriate levels for each of those phases. There is a 20% local match, so our program will provide 80% of the funding, and there's a local match for the other 20% that can be waived or partially waived if a community is in need. And all you need to do to flag that for us is to just reach out and let us know either via email or your application. And then in terms of payment, so the county will make a payment for 50% of the cost upfront to help get the project up off the ground. And then the remaining grant award would be paid at the end of the project once semi-annual and final reports with documentation of expenses have been received and reviewed. And again, there's more information about that reporting in the program guide. So what is required of awardees who do actually have their project selected for funding? For projects that are in the conceptual design and preliminary engineering phases, we ask that you commit to move forward with implementation and construction. And then for all project types, we ask that you comply with all federal and state requirements regarding accessibility for people with disabilities. We ask that you coordinate with the local transit providers, road agencies, and property owners related to the project to obtain all necessary approvals, easements, rights of way, and permits within the proposed project timeline. We ask that you maintain the project site and any approved project scope items installed for the intended design life, which you can include in your project application. We ask that you comply with the requirements of the Davis-Bacon Act or the Michigan Prevailing Wage Act. We ask that you certify all design and or construction, certify that it was completed according to industry standards. And finally, just to help get the Oakland Transit information out there and understand what the funding is supporting in our communities, we ask that you install a recognition plaque at the end of the project completion. In terms of timeline, the application window opens today. Looking forward to receiving your applications, and they'll be due by November 8th. There's an online form, and we can include the link for that is on the Oakland Transit website and will be sent out to you later after this webinar. And yes, so please get your application in by November 8th. Once the application window closes, we will take the next couple of months to sit down with the selection committee that I viewed in a previous slide to review and score your applications based on that selection criteria. And we're hoping by early next year that projects will be selected and presented to our Board of Commissioners for approval. Interlocal agreements will be executed with the awardees, and initial payments will be made hopefully at the beginning of next year. Looking to 2025 and beyond, so the program guide gives more information about the reporting that's required by awardees. They'll submit status reports as the project continues to progress, and that will give us a way to report to our Board of Commissioners what's being done with the funding and how it's progressing. And then upon project completion, the awardees will submit a final report, final payments will be made, and the Oakland Transit plaques will be installed at project sites. If you're ready to apply, here are some next steps for you. So please visit our website. We can put this link in the chat here in a bit. And also if you just Google Oakland Transit, it will pop up and you can find it there. Please make sure to review the program guide. It provides a lot more detail into the things that we've given an overview about today. You'll need to obtain a certified resolution from your city or village council or township board. And there's an example of one that's provided in the program guide that you can use. Please coordinate with the state and the county road commission to obtain a letter of support for your project if it is located on a state or county road. And please complete and submit an online program application by the deadline of November 8th. There is a blank version available for download on our website so that you don't have to go through the online form to see what the questions are. You can just use that blank version to prepare questions ahead of time before trying to submit them in the online form. And of course, if you have any questions or clarifications, please reach out to Eli and myself. Our contact information is also on the website. So I appreciate your time. I think we'll open it up to questions and answers now.
Sarah, I don't see any Q&A, but if anybody has a direct question, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand and we can answer any questions you may have.
There's a question in the chat. It says, do we need to have conceptual designs ready to go for the first option?
So trying to, thank you for that clarification. I believe the answer is, do you need to have the designs ready? No, because we're willing to fund the design process. The further along that you are with the project, you can apply for different phases. But at this point, recognizing that this is a brand new program and you know what you know, and we don't have that knowledge yet, please feel free to apply as early as conceptual design, if that's where you are in your thinking.
Okay, and I dropped the link in the chat for the transit webpage, so please feel free to click on that. As Sarah mentioned before, we'll be posting the recording of this webinar to that location. And there's also the contact information for Sarah and Eli posted there as well. Sarah, do you see any other questions in the chat at all?
I do not.
Okay, well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today and being part of the webinar. As we mentioned before, please reach out to Sarah and Eli if you do have any questions, and we look forward to seeing your applications. Thanks, everybody.